Sanchez of Luis Pineda Productions.
I'm Joseph S. Sanchez.
And I'm Luis Pineda, and we're in my backyard.
And today we're going to be discussing about two different events in the early stages of American history.
You already know.
Here we go.
And today I'll be talking about slavery's role in changing the American economy and society from 1492 to 1877.
And today I'll be discussing the changing role of women in American society from colonial times through Reconstruction.
Both very interesting topics, which
And
I might add.
Here we go. And today, our first special, not so special guest, my good friend, and well, we're in his house, so Luis Pineda. Give a round of applause for Luis. Take the stage, Luis. Go ahead.
Okay, so slavery, as you know, well, if you don't know, started in the colony of Jamestown in Virginia in 1619 when 20 enslaved Africans were brought to it.
Wait, Luis.
What's up?
Was it 1619 like the first time there was enslaved people in America?
No, actually, no. Enslaved people have been known to be in America anywhere like as early as the 1500s.
1500.
Have you ever had claustrophobia? You know, sitting in a cramped elevator, sitting in a cramped car with your primos or something like that. Well, let me tell you something. That's nothing to do with the slave ships that were back then. Transported the Africans all the way from West Africa to the colonies. Because let me tell you something. These ships, they only gave each enslaved person, no matter if it was a woman or, well, there were a little bit of restrictions, but normally everybody would get about 1 foot of space, so everybody would just be laying down, something like this. Yeah, something like that. You know, it was really bad how the slaves were being treated, and this blueprint, this wasn't that bad. This was actually the best it had been with the regulations. You know, this ship's name is Brooks. Okay, this ship had 454 enslaved people in it.
Although before 1788, which is when they made restrictions on ships transporting slaves, this ship was known to have transported as many as 609 enslaved Africans to the American colonies, which is a crazy number considering it was already cramped. Like, after regulations, the ship already looks cramped enough as it is with the 454 slaves. Now, imagine the 609 that had to endure the pain and the stench and just the discomfort that they had to endure in that really cramped ship.
You know, expanding on the topic about slaves being treated as property, you know, they weren't treated with respect or with any rights at all. So, slave owners were free to do anything they wanted with the women and anything they wanted with the men and children. So, they would the women and the children, even though they were family, most of the time they would be separated if sold to different owners. You know, there were even women like that were raped, like the story of Harriet Jacobs, a woman who was raped and assaulted in her time with her owner. There were also stories about people like Solomon Northrop, who was captured as a free man. Just telling you that he was a free man in the North, but was captured and was a slave for 12 years. I know y'all know him. He was a slave for 12 years, and after some time, he eventually found a way to escape slavery and go back up to the North. His autobiography was really interesting by the fact that it showed the brutality of slavery and the hardships that slaves faced with their owners and all the sorts.
Okay, like for example, there was a part in 12 Years a Slave where Solomon Northrop was forced to whip Patsy, another slave. And he reluctantly did it, but even though he whipped her, his owner still took away the whip and started whipping Patsy because he felt that Solomon didn't whip Patsy hard enough.
Okay, now let's move on and talk about slave laws. So there were many slave laws that were passed in this time period of pre-Civil War.
An example of this
was the Compromise of 1850, which basically gave popular sovereignty, which is the right to vote, to the territory that the U.S. had recently acquired from Mexico, and also set in motion the fugitive slave law, which basically stated that any runaway slave that escaped to the north could be taken back to the south by a southern slave owner if they wanted to go and search them. Now, Pennsylvania had tried to fight the fugitive slave law because in their state law, it was illegal for somebody to go into Pennsylvania and try to get a slave back because they were technically considered a free man by the time they got to Pennsylvania. But eventually, the Supreme Court ruled that the National Fugitive Slave Law overruled Pennsylvania's state law.
Now, the economy in the North and the South were very different. The North, it was pretty industrial. There were no slaves needed. That's why the North was there were free states over there. It was all free. There was no need for slavery, no need to grow any crops to actually make an economy. In the South, though, the economy was very different. Since the climate down there was very hot over there and humid, and the soil was very rich and fertile, the slaves were needed to actually help pick cotton mainly, but also for other crops. So it was a very agricultural based society down in the South. So slaves were they actually shaped how the South's economy worked. They needed slaves like how nowadays farmers need tractors and all these fancy equipment to actually function the farm correctly. They needed slaves as they were literally making money for them. So, in summary, socially, all slaves changed people's perspectives on them. They were seen as lower class. Anglo Americans felt that they were like a higher class just because of the color of their skin. Just on the economical status, slavery was actually really needed. Well, not in the north, but more down south. Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, states like that where they had really fertile soil, so they could really plant a lot of crops, and with those crops, a lot of money, and they needed some free labor. Slaves were the choice that they had. Okay. Thank you for hearing me out about slavery. Hope you learned a thing or two about it. Now that my segment is done, let's move on to my boy, the myth, the legend, Josephat Sanchez.
Okay, so thank you, Luis. Okay,
Yep.
so first things first, I'll start off with my research question again. So, how did the role of woman change from colonial times through Reconstruction? So before I get on into like answering that, I wanna define one thing you could say. So I'll start off with male chauvinism. I think I said it right, but what that basically means is that men think like they actually think they're superior than women. So we have men up here and women down here. So, well, not only in the early stages of America, but even now, there's a lot of people out there that think that women are just inferior than us men. But, well, yeah, I don't really think it's true, but I feel like we're both equal in certain things. We both have pros and cons.
Yes.
But yeah, going back to early stages, every man, every male, they when they saw women, they would just see them as inferior people, not more like inferior as in like how whites saw slaves like African Americans, but just they felt like they had some sort of power or like they were just stronger, smarter, they were more able to do more things than women. And that's what male chauvinism is. So going back to to Lucy's topic about slavery, there's this one woman from the Wyandotte tribe that, well, back in the days, many women didn't have like the power or like the power to like speak up over certain
Issues.
problems or issues that they were facing. Maybe not only them, but like in the world, and they didn't have that power to speak up about it because they were seen as inferior, and if they did, they would either, I'd say, like get in trouble with someone
Yes.
because they weren't supposed to do that in
Yeah.
quotation marks. And well, she decided to speak up about slavery and how it was basically not good. It went against their beliefs of as a Christian tribe. So an example of how the changing role of women like changed from colonial times through Reconstruction was that women, little by little, they started to speak up about problems they saw in the world, and they weren't like scared or like just held back by certain things. So now they like were confident enough to speak up to the world about issues. So going back to the question on how women's role changed through American history, I'd say the most critical article that I have like to inform you about is the one about Abigail and John Adams' converse on women's rights of 1776. So if I didn't know, Abigail was John Adams' wife, and well, she strongly believed that women should have some sort of power because back then they didn't have no power at all. And she told, and later she wrote to her husband, which was then the president of the United States. She said this famous or like really critical like quote, you could say, and it said, "Remember the ladies." So remember the ladies. She's basically saying that John Adams, in every law that he created or made, or every action that he made upon the USA, that he should always have the like have what that thing he's doing, how could that affect the woman? And well, John Adams, his response was actually pretty crazy. Like, keep in mind that it was his wife he was talking back to, you know. And well, basically, John Adams like laughed at her. He actually took her letter and like thought he read it, and he basically laughed. He didn't really think she was serious. Back then, like I said, all men thought women were inferior than them. They thought they were all of that, and yeah, he just thought it was a joke, and I feel like that was the main, not the main, but like the most critical event in history that caused all of this change in women's role. It went from men thinking women are a joke and laughing at them for wanting more power or wanting to be more than caregivers, more than housewives. They wanted like to work, help out, and have their voice heard. And yeah, that was probably one of the most, in my opinion, the most critical event that caused all of this changing role in women's. To expand on my point on how women's role changed, I want to talk about this woman. Her name is Harriet Beecher Stowe. So she was anti-slave. Like, she didn't think slaves were a good thing. And well, she basically spoke up about it. She was one of the few women that decided to speak up and let her voice be heard. She talked to the people up north for them to be anti-slavery as well. So you could say she spread out the word for people to know the brutality slavery actually was, and how like bad it was that people were being treated like this. And yeah, so to summarize everything I've said, the changing role of women went from them being seen as just caregivers stay-at-home wives, just like you could say in the most not like rude way, just stay home and clean basically. That like it shifted from that to being something more empowering, such as them being leaders for abolition movement, from them being social activists, from them speaking up about certain problems society had. And well, that caused a change in basically all every woman's life. And the most critical and the most important thing they have achieved was in 1920 when they were able to get suffrage. And suffrage is the right to vote. Women had never had the right to vote until 1920. And through all of this changing role of women, that was like their main goal. Get the right to suffrage. And well, it took time for them to get it, but at the end of the day, they were able to achieve it. And well, that was probably it for today, guys. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for listening to us yap about slavery
and the changing role of women. It was.
Thank you for watching this video. It's another Luis Productions video. Luis and Josephat. You know, hope y'all enjoyed the topic we talk about. You know, I hope y'all enjoyed the talk about slavery
and the changing role of women.
Yes, sir. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Hope y'all stayed entertained for the whole video.
And hit that follow button. Let's go.
Hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button. Hit the follow button. Hit every button.
And you're
I'll see
screaming,
y'all.
bro.